And now here we go again.
It's time for another episode of those shit-talking guys, full of opinions on games, music, cultures, and other random shit, all while humiliating each other. This is Generation Flip. Don't forget, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. And now, wrapping it up, here's your hosts.
Hey, how you guys doing? Flip here with Generation Flip. I have my boy Big Brown from San Jose on the panel. We have my cousin Brandon from New York, Brandon Bash. And we have two special guests here today. We have the Fly guy, Marcus, coming from LA, and Mr. Johnson. You can say hi. But we definitely got these two guys, and we're going to have a couple of questions. They do represent LA Unified, so we're going to get into a little detail with the coronavirus that we previously talked about. Brown and I had a couple of episodes, but what we really want basically to give you guys the idea of their perspective, their opinions, strictly their opinions, and we'll have to respect their opinions. But basically what the outcome is in the classroom. So what exactly the teachers actually, what they're going through and what the administration's going through with all these mandates and stuff. So I'm going to start with Mr. Flye. So from your perspective, you're a teacher. Give me a little background on yourself.
Sure. So as for myself, I've been in the teaching profession for roughly, I can't believe it's already been, over 20 years, already, and my background lends itself to originally, teaching, middle school, and, I eventually, made it out of the middle school camp. From middle school camp, I was shifted over to something called the arts branch, in the school district, and that exposed me to being able to work with elementary school teachers and their students, and sharing how to use the arts specifically, within their curriculum. I was destined more than likely to be, an instructor in that field, mainly because I majored in radio and television and film in college, and then had a great opportunity to work on the ABC News, and back in the day, and also to work at Universal Pictures and CBS Television, Dick Clark Productions and BET Television as well. And I guess I wanted something different, get into education, and made my way to the arts branch, and had a great time, doing that, and eventually ended up at a high school where I'm at now. And, for a while there, I think they were trying to figure out where we're going to put this guy. And taking over the theater tech, film class. And before it was actually called just theater tech, and I changed it to theater tech and film. So I'm in fact the theater tech film instructor who happens to also, hold a preliminary credential in psychology. In other words, being a school psychologist. And so that's where I'm at in education.
Nice. That's a nice resume, man. That's really awesome, man. And I can definitely, give you guys both props for dealing with the education. I mean, that's very important. So to Mr. Johnson, can you give us welcome to the Generation Flip, first of all. Thank you for coming on. So with your background, why don't you give us a little bit about it?
Sure. Thank you for having me, first of all. And man, after Marcus's resume, my resume is going to pale in comparison to his. I started teaching way back in '99. So I've been doing this for about good 20 plus years as well.
I think we started at the same time.
Yeah, around the same time. So I started in the middle school level first, did about 10 years of middle school, and then switched over to the high school, just wanted a little bit more of a challenge. So switched over to high school, and I've been doing that for the last 12 or so years. I teach in our school has in the high school portion anyway, we're a K through 12 school, and so in the high school portion we have 3 main academies and 1 pathway. So we have the Finance Academy, the Health Academy, and the Tech Academy. And so I teach in the Finance Academy, and I'm the history teacher in the Finance Academy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, it's good to hear that the finance, I've always been wondering why there wasn't more taught about financing, saving, things of that nature in the high school, because I think that is so important. And once again, hats off to both of you. Educators are the most important positions in the world, honestly, truly. You guys are educating our future. So hats off. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you.
So I want to go, let's touch base. We all know the pandemic's here. We wish that it wasn't, but it's here. And the nation has been faced with a lot of obstacles and challenges in every way with this pandemic. Again, Brown and I have talked about coronavirus in the past in our episodes. So I want to ask you guys, with mandates, LA Unified School District with mandates, mask wearing, and kids are now fully back in school, even in New York now, right, Brandon? I think they're back to school in New York.
Yeah, I believe they are. I don't know too much about the schools. I don't have kids, so I'm not sure. But I do know that they are in school. As far as the mandates and stuff for masks, I'd imagine it's similar to what they have for the city in regards to the clubs and bars, because you have to have a vaccine and you have to have your mask.
You have to have it. That's no doubt about it. Even in public transportation, I mean, the requirement by law is to have a mask on the bus or any transit that you on that deals with public. You got to have a mask on. But in your guys' case, it's a little, it's really rough, I think, because you got the school kids back in town. They're back in school. And so myself, I mentioned this in the past, that traveling, I see school kids lined up on the outside, trying to get in. Mr. Johnson, do you see that at your school? They obviously line up outside, and then they get temperature, they get their vaccine cards and stuff?
So what they do now is, they're following all the Department of Public Health guidelines, or at least they're supposed to. And kids have to get what's called a daily pass. So on there are screening questions that they ask. Do you have any of the following symptoms? Right? Have you been in contact with anybody who tested positive? Things like that. So the students have to answer those questions. And then once they answer the question a certain way, they'll either get a QR code on their phones, and then they have to show it to the person that's screening them in the front of the school at the gates before they allowed in. Now, so there's no temperature screening or anything like that anymore. They were doing that at the end of spring when students were coming in on a limited basis. They're not doing that anymore.
It's weird, because I actually just went to go grab something to eat, and that restaurant that I went to, the lady came in for her shift, and they were checking her temperature before she even signed on to work.
Yeah,
so
I think what's especially what Mr. Johnson's discussing and saying is that you're right, Chris. That in restaurants and other businesses, I think that anything that exists indoors, right now they're being mandated to do a temperature screening. Now on a school campus, especially with LAUSD and surrounding school districts, all of them are taking part in something called the Daily Pass, as Mr. Johnson had mentioned. It's the Daily Pass is interesting because what it does is on the campus of the school, they actually have a testing or screening or so to speak set up. And they're all in the medical field, and they come to the school, and each child and each teacher and each administrator or whoever happens to be working on that campus, goes and they take the I guess it's a nostril test. You give it to them. It's a sealed capsule container. And then within a couple of days or so, I think 24 hours, you get the results. And the way that teachers, we find out our results are we take the test, and then we go on to the website and look for our daily pass. And this hasn't happened to me, but I'm assuming that if you took your nostril COVID test and you weren't clear, then I assume that when you try to go and get a QR code, it won't print for you. It will tell you that you need to, probably quarantine and go home. Much like what we were talking about earlier when there was a couple of students who came to school. I don't know how they got through the screening, but they did, and believe it or not, as of right now, as we speak, we're looking at students who recently have been sent home, because turns out they were testing positive, had been exposed to COVID-19 and the variant Delta, as well, or maybe both. We don't know which one. All we know is that this is what happened on the actual campus.
Because I do recall in the news that there were some schools in California that actually sent quite a bit of students back home due to the outbreak. So
yeah, I know that happened in Florida, right?
I'm not sure with Florida, but I know I know for sure Orange County was affected by it. So I don't know in New York. Do you hear anything about that in New York, Brandon?
In regards to sending kids home and stuff like that?
Yeah, for the outbreak, like if someone had the outbreak in their school, were they sending kids home?
Nothing yet. I can bring up from my job that they would send you home at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then anyone that you were in contact with would also have to be quarantined.
What I'm trying to understand, in the past I've brought this up, is that I noticed that there's a huge line outside the premises of any campus, any campus. And I know they're trying to do their best, follow CDC protocols and stuff. It's just, do you think they can handle this at a better way? You both, Marcus, do you?
Listen, this is what a conversation piece, because I feel like we talk about it, almost every day because of what we see. Let me tell you what's happening right now. Right now, we're at the beginning of the school year, and I don't know what most other folks are thinking about how education works, but each teacher usually has like a unit of study, that they're making an attempt to accomplish. So in other words, there's like a list of things in an agenda that they would like, or not that they would like, that they know that in order to pass this class, these are the marks you need to hit. These are, the goals that need to be achieved. These are the targets that need to be met in order for the learning to be considered somewhat of a success. And because of what's happening right now, in the schools, most likely, obviously LAUSD, I have teachers, that are near me that are PE teachers, especially, that they are almost taking the PE class, so the kids are missing that part of their education, and they're saying, you're not going to do PE. Right now the COVID test is on the campus, every week, mostly Mondays and Tuesdays. Now, when they're there, it is mandatory. It is mandatory on a Monday or a Tuesday that you go and get your updated COVID check, because you need that QR code. Now, when that happens, I don't know, the lines are long even on the campus, so right now we have kids getting in line, say school starts at 8:30, they go to their first class, and maybe some kids are missing that, and they're getting in line, at 8:45, and these kids are missing that whole entire class, whatever that first period is. And if it's not first period, it's another period during the day that the kids are missing. Right now, there's got to be some sort of dip, in the educational, process. There's got to be there's a gap. Right now it's so funny because when we talk about education, we normally discuss how in the inner city, there's something called a learning gap, meaning that there are pieces of things in education that the child is missing, for one reason or another, and for a while, 10 years ago, they were having the discussion about, it was like called closing, the learning gap, with these students. And right now, I want to use the word debauchery, because it is quite the mess, if you ask me. Right. We already said that last year, for instance, in 2020, that when this COVID thing hit and the kids were sent home, there were so many students, per se, who were, supposed to be in school. However, there was, hey, this one doesn't have technology. This one doesn't have a computer. Right. This one would like to be learning. However, they can't, because they're 12 years old, but they got to take care of their 3 younger siblings. And by the way, their parents have COVID. So now they've got to be in charge of the household at 12. They've got to be in charge of the house, or 14 or 16. But bottom line is, these kids weren't doing their homework. They weren't coming to class. Right. And so what a major, I'm telling you, this is all over the country. What a major loss most students had in 2020 as a lost generation of a year in education. And I tell you, the proof is going to come out later, that we lost that much. Now this year, this is interesting because we're all back on campus, but people get sick. Kids are going home. Kids are missing class because they have to take their daily COVID test, and this is quite the handful at the moment.
I get that.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but I think one of the big things that we don't even realize yet too is the psychological effect it's going to do to these kids, right? Because I'm an adult. I'm 53. I mean, I think I'm stout and strong, but I'll tell you what, it's psychologically affecting me. There's times where I go someplace and I go, God, why do I feel weird? It's hard to breathe today, or it's just, and your mind, it can tell you whatever. And unfortunately, we have a tendency to gravitate wherever our mind tells us. So I can just imagine a kid going through what they're going through. So psychological, we're going to need counselors,
Funny you said psychological. I know my child. I have two kids. I have a son and a daughter. My son seems to be, maintaining in the middle of this, but my daughter, look, girls especially, I think, thrive on relationships and communication. And for this young girl who's, child who's 11 years old and now 12, imagine she could not see or communicate with any of her friends. Right. And then something weird happened and she lost her, two best friends. And so here's this kid who normally communicates and has friends and plays all day, suddenly for 6 months or so can't see anybody, can't see any of her friends. And she went into her room and literally went into a short version of a depression. How many other kids did that happen to? Probably a lot.
A lot.
We had a lot of kids last year, especially when we were fully online, had a lot of mental health issues. Yeah. For a whole host of reasons that Marcus already mentioned, and so these are the kids that are now coming back in person, right? A lot of kids chose to come back in person because they don't want to be at home anymore. Right. They've been at home for a year and a half, right? Yeah. And so they want to be with their friends. They want to, talk to their peers and, not take care of them. Some are doing it to escape the family household and things that are happening around them because, some of us saw just too much, when their cameras were on, And, so, there's all that. So psychological impact, definitely. There's a lot of kids coming back with mental health issues. So we were told, at the beginning of the year and towards the end of last year, we have to prepare for kids coming back. And we were told, the way you prepare for kids coming back is by making sure you build relationships with the kids. So they said the first few weeks, just focus on building relationships with the kids because they haven't had you, they haven't seen you, they haven't been with you for over a year and a half. Right. So start there, right? This is just to help, kind of ease some of that trauma the kids went through all last year and a half, right? Right. And the first day of school, they come into school, right? Yeah. And they have to stand in this enormous line that goes all the way around this, our campus. Yes. I mean, our campus is huge, right? And the system completely fails, right? So students can't even get their daily passes to get into the campus, right? So what is, these are all messages that kids are getting, like very first day of school, right? The system fails, and they're like, wait, you've had all summer to work on this, right? To make sure that things are ready for us when we come back. You've known for such and such time that we are all coming back to school. So, these are all things that kids are now, they begin to internalize these things, right?
Right. Mr. Johns is onto something, but I want you to think about something else, is that when it comes to learning, the learning process, the primary years, kindergarten, you can almost tell the difference. You can, not almost. You can tell the difference of a child who went to kindergarten or preschool opposed to a child who shows up for school the first time in first grade. Yep. There's a difference. Now imagine these kids who normally get that, who excel in school, and suddenly, because of what's happening right now, the kids who need that very basic, experience, learning in a school and classroom, that's now taken away from them, and all of them, What is that going to do, and how does that affect the student and their family, and how does it affect the educational process?
Right.
Developmental years, most important.
Absolutely.
Right? So when you see that and they get, I guess you could say, traumatized somewhat with the media, what's going on, and then every time you put the news on, another 250 died today, or another 750 died this month, or whatever. I mean, we got to the point where I shut the TV off. We ain't watching the news, because all my daughter, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and all she kept thinking is, how many died today? And that's not the thought process I want in her mind. But media would push that out. So psychological, media, the unknown, right? The misinformed, it just goes on and on and on. And then when you take a kid, like they say, you can teach a kid several different languages within a certain few years of their life. But when you strip 1 year away, man, it's tough to catch up.
Yeah, it is.
At least I'm not an educator, but I would just imagine if I doing the math, it's basically what it is. You strip, 365 days plus from a kid from doing a day-to-day learning process, because that's what school does, right? School trains you in a process that helps educate you and learn as time goes on. So, it just keeps going. But when you stop that river and you shut the water off, you're stagnant, man. It's a mess.
I think the other piece that folks might not want to bring up, that we got to stare at it, because it's going to be reality. And our reality is this, we see it all the time in LAUSD. I feel like there's almost two sets of rules for students, meaning that if you are a student who happens to be going to school, per se, in East LA, South LA, or Watts, your educational learning is going to be a little different than the child who goes to school in Sherman Oaks, and areas like that. So in other words, what happens is they these kids, they just get more. They learn, they get a lot more, obviously because they have access, or they have parents who've gone to college or what have you, opposed to this kid who comes home and they're worried about, what am I going to eat today? Am I going to sleep okay? Where are we sleep? There's a lot happening. And so when this whole thing is happening, I think what's really the thing to look at is to see who's thriving, who's going to thrive from this,
right.
Even though kids are missing. And like I said before, we have a learning gap. You have kids from, certain areas who are going to thrive. They're just going to thrive, because they have support. One of the things that our principal shared with us, she said, all of your kids are probably going to be fine, because every last one of you are college educated and you're either a professor status or you're a teacher. There's a lot that you get that some people just don't get. So your kids are going to be fine. It's the people who are not educators. What's going to happen to their kids? And I say there's going to be quite the divide. There's going to be quite the divide that we're going to see, and I say you can measure it in time. It's going to be something else in about 10 years. It's going to be something else in about 5 years.
Well, here's that term, no kid left behind, right?
No child left behind.
Yeah.
There it is.
But it's a tough one, man. I think the situation we're in, there's going to be a big gap. There'll be a big gap, and it's the unknown. How do we speed the process up? But I think at the depending on the age of the individual kid and the support that they get at home, that's what I think it's going to vary. And when we look at San Jose Unified School Districts, LA Unified School Districts, we got schools that are up here, and then we got schools, a lot of them are down here. And that's going to affect a lot of these kids. And the parents have to prepare themselves. And it's like everything else in life or in the world. Our job as a parent is to educate our kids and give them the tools necessary. Not everybody has that opportunity. But if we could try to figure it out, because the educators have the toughest job. I'll tell you hands down. I know it. I'm a construction guy. I've never been into higher education. I didn't graduate college, but I know how important it is, and it's a fact, how important it is to be educated properly as a kid for your future to look prosperous, and their parents have to support them in that. I'm just concerned. I'm concerned that it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, so just on the topic of no kid left behind, you know, since we have two educators here. Me personally, I felt like no kid left behind, at least in my school system, not sure how it is in yours, when I was going to school, was we're going to push these kids through, and that's how they're not going to get left behind. Do you guys actually believe in no kid left behind, or do you guys feel like there should be a little bit more care, especially in this time, given to these kids? Maybe they should be left behind a little bit to catch up, and then, you know, not just pushed through and like allowed to succeed. They should be, you know, succeeding on their own,
Right.
and brought up with everyone else that's being brought in.
Yeah, so just to respond to Brandon, you know, I have a pretty strong opinion of No Child Left Behind. I actually call it No Child Left Untested.
That's
The whole program was a push to test kids to death. You know, it made education not fun, and it made teaching for an educator even more miserable. So imagine if your teacher is miserable in front of you, imagine what the students are feeling.
Right.
Well, yeah, we could tell our teacher just didn't enjoy it.
No,
And then they get backlash from the kids as well. I'm 25
Absolutely.
now, but it's not that far gone for me to remember it, you know?
Right. No, so, you know, what it did was it created this sort of tiers, right, between schools, and the so-called what the politicians and these testing companies, you know, created, called, oh, these are just healthy competition between schools. We all know it wasn't healthy competition. You know, the schools that Marcus and I teach in were already handicapped to begin with, right, because of the populations that we deal with.
Right.
And the black and brown kids were left behind, you know, no matter how you look at it. And so what a lot of these black and brown schools began to do, especially in the inner cities, places like South LA, and I have like anecdotes of friends who taught at these schools, is that right before the testing, right, the big standardized testing, what a lot of these schools in the inner city began to do was they began kicking students out who were low performing, who didn't do well, things like that, so that they could keep the good kids in school at the time to make it look like they're doing really well on those tests.
They really do
To
that.
inflate their scores.
That's some kind of like that's some kind of like movie. You know, it's like one of those stand and deliver. You know, movies.
Yeah, like it's like a stand and deliver, right? Yeah, absolutely.
I worked at a school. I want to say the name, but I won't. I'll say it's definitely a person's name. I'll tell you that much. You know, I was so shocked. I remember I was there. The year had to be 20. I want to say maybe 2013, maybe 2014, and no 2013. And I remember the principal. There was these kids. They were seniors. And he had a meeting with about 43 of these kids. Here's what the meeting was about. Listen, we've been talking to you guys since your freshman year. We've been talking to you about improving your grades. We've been talking about deciding to show up to class. None of you in this room. And they said he had this meeting with them and their parents present.
Wow.
And he said, listen, what I think is that right now, this institution is about pushing kids to the top, and you're not interested in that. You parents, I've tried calling you, and I've gotten very little results. So, and as the parents were trying to interrupt, he kept putting his hand up and saying, listen, this is our decision. Our counselors are here. We want each one of you to have a meeting with the counselor right now, because as of today, you are no longer enrolled at, I wish the next name the school, this school. So when we came back after Christmas, we were missing almost 50 seniors who have been replaced, displaced or so in new schools, because he didn't want them there, bringing the numbers down.
Wow. So this is very interesting, because this is what really happens in reality. You see it in the movies. You people out there getting the take from you guys. I mean, this is really happening. Schools are really doing that, and not to mention that like you mentioned, West LA and all that out that way. Sherman Oaks, they have more privilege. They have more privilege for their students than they do here in East LA or in any South LA area. It's just Yeah, I hate to say it, but it's reality. It is what it is. And it's not just California. I'm sure New York has its episodes out there too, where certain districts, do the same thing,
So I was in both. I was in a school upstate, which had a massive campus. It had 3 football fields, 2 baseball fields, like just to, try and put in perspective how massive this campus was. Full weight room. Again, sports guy here, but not only just that, the education, they had just a classroom for everything, anything that you could want to do. They even had wood shop. You're not going to find wood shop down in the city. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to happen.
Well, that's not, when I was, I graduated in 96, but back then in the early 90s, they had wood shop, they had parenting class, they had driver's ed, they had workshop, they had arts class. They probably stopped art, but they had so many things open to the students. And now I'm going through.
They don't have anything.
It's like, what are you guys teaching? You got to learn some kind of trade as well. That's beneficial to the child. That's how I see it.
That's a reaction to our economy.
Yeah.
Our economy went from a manufacturing economy to a service-oriented industry, right? So our economic issues that surround our country have a big part to play in that as well. So we no longer manufacture here, right? We take everything overseas.
Right.
Everything is produced overseas and manufactured overseas. So that had a lot to do with our economics in this country and our economic policies. And I could relate to that as well. I graduated in '91. So I remember going to wood shop. These are some of the shop classes that kept me in school. I wasn't interested in school otherwise. If it wasn't sports or shop class, I wasn't there. So that kept me in school. So I could totally relate to that, and completely relate to that. But, the other thing that this issue does, with this No Child Left Behind is that it created increased what's known as the school to prison pipeline for our black and brown youth.
Yep.
And it's just enormously increased the numbers. And it's devastated our communities in which we teach. And so
I was thinking what Brandon had mentioned just a little while ago about, again, leaving the kid left behind to teach him or to get that child caught up to this year that has been missed. Do you think it's more with the higher grades, like high school, or actually the whole system from elementary to high school? They all need to at least come back and retrain in some way, or do you feel that way?
I'll let Mr. I'm sorry, Mr. I'll let Johnson speak first.
Thanks. I personally don't feel that there's much learning loss. Because you have to look at what's being taught, right? So if you look at what's being taught, if we're teaching to a test, right, which is what's been happening in a lot of schools, and if we're teaching to a test, there's not much learning loss there, right? And so what I do in my classes, I teach them about life. I teach them to think. I teach them to, look at history and, evaluate history and what's happened to people. Let's look at what's happened to all different walks of life of people. Okay, not just the people that are mentioned in our textbooks. A lot of my students come to me and they're like, why do we need to learn history anyway? It's just all about old dead white men, right? And so, they look at me like, well, you know what? That was my exact sentiment when I was in high school. I hated history coming through high school, right? Because all of my history classes were taught by all the football coaches and basketball coaches and volleyball coaches, you name it. All they said was, look, if you're an athlete, just come sit down. You got an A in the class.
Wow.
Don't give me any trouble. And this is on the west side. This is on the west side of LA.
Wow.
Right? And it's not even in the inner city. Right? So, this is Culver City, and that's where I went to school. And so that was my experience. And of course, I got a whole different experience once I started college. And that's when history was really awakened in me.
I can say what the other part of that coin looks like, and that is this. For myself, Mr. Johnson, you were. I keep saying that. You were in Culver City. While you were busy in Culver City, I was in school, an African American in school, in a little place called Claremont. Now if you know anything about Claremont, it's, I don't know how to say this. It's a suburban community that has a whole lot more people that happen to not be black or brown. And so what I recall is I actually had help. And what I mean by that is my mother, works for the school district. So she kept up on everything. But let me tell you something. A great number of the brown and black kids in Claremont were excluded, and a lot of activities as far as, academia, is concerned. I remember I had to almost beg to be in this class called 20th Century History, because I knew it was college prep, and my own counselor wanted me to take class with my sports friends, who happened to be black or brown like myself. And she said you would have fun in that class. Now, that means that was not really, it was not really transferable. I mean, I guess you needed to graduate, right? But it wasn't at all like 20th Century History. I got in that class, and myself and two other people were the only dark-skinned people in that class. Everyone else was different. And I remember that in that class, it was privileged like you wouldn't believe. Kids were coming in, they let you come in with, Burger King, or because, I don't know if you had time to eat during lunch, but you can eat in this class. They would let the kids, accept their food. And as long as they're taking notes, you can eat in here. It was some stuff going on, and no one who looked like me really had that class, except for the exception of a couple people.
I want to open up the door here for other questions Brown or Brandon have, but I'm going to first ask you guys both, Johnson and Flye. What I want to ask you is, I'm reading a report here from Los Angeles Unified School District, and they have it highlighted here. So I wanted to read this part and ask you guys a question. And it says here that basically all students 12 years or older will be required to have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by January 10th of 2022. Unless, now here's my question, unless they have a medical or other exemptions. Now here's what I want to ask you guys. Now you have students that have these exemptions from whether if there's a doctor or whatever. They have a right to go to class. They have a right to get their education, be in school. But they have this exemption where they don't want to wear a mask, or they don't even get the vaccines. How do you guys feel, and how do you guys react to that? I'll start with Johnson.
Yeah, so, I'll start with my son. I have a son who's 14 who's got special needs. I'm privileged in the sense that I can live in Santa Monica, and he goes to the Santa Monica schools. And we, of course, have to fight tooth and nail to get him the services that he needs at his school. So, my son sometimes gets asthma. He's got all these issues, health issues. So if there's a kid that cannot medically wear a mask, right, they have a right to that, right? I mean, if they're kids with special circumstances, right, and special needs, there are other ways that students can attend school without wearing a mask, right? We have them on a face shield, right? You can wear a face shield. It's not constricting. It's not, cutting off any air circulation, anything like that, right? So there are different ways to work around it, right? He's been vaccinated, so we got him vaccinated as soon as, they reduced the age to 12. Went and got him vaccinated because we wanted to make him protect, because he had a lot of anxiety about, going back in person, because the schools and the teachers kept saying, oh, we're going to open up at the end of spring and stuff like that. But he wasn't ready because he felt like he was going to get COVID because of all this talk. Every class, every teacher's talking about it, right? And then he comes home and, his parents are talking about it. It's on the news all over, like you said, Flip, right? And so he started developing all these anxiety, right, about going back in person. So we kept him at home. We said, look, you just continue online, finish this year off. There's only 2 months left. And then we'll think about what's going to happen in the fall. We'll look at the situation and see if things have improved. We'll send you back. Right? So we're comfortable now sending him back. He's got severe allergies. So his nose is constantly running. He's going to sneeze a lot. He's going to need to blow his nose a lot. His tears, his eyes are going to be watering. That's just him. That's just who he is. So we made sure that his team of specialists at the school that he has make all the teachers aware of his condition, first of all, right? And to make sure that he's not targeted, he's not singled out, he's not isolated somewhere in the back of the classroom or whatever because of his disability, you know? And so looking at it from that perspective, when I came to school, you know, obviously if a child can wear a mask, they should wear a mask. If they can't wear it, they need to have, you know, some kind of medical reason for not wearing it, right? With the vaccine, same thing. You know, it's a decision that the parent and the child have to make. You know, it's an individual decision. But if it's mandated, you know, we have to look at, well, what's the reason they're mandating it? Okay, is it for the greater good? Yeah. You know, if it's something that, you know, we can do without, then no. You know, because, you know, you have to look at everything, you know, right? Look at all the factors before you make that decision. So, yeah, there are exceptions, right? So the exemptions are religious or medical. You know, and if you truly have religious or medical exemptions, yeah, by all means, you know, you don't need to be vaccinated, but make sure that you are protecting yourself and protecting your peers and the people around you. You know, as long as that safety precautions are there and protocols are there and they're in place, you know, I don't have an issue with it.
Right.
You know, and that's just.
And you, Mr. Flye, how do you feel about that?
Well, almost similar but different, because my kids had a first-on experience. You know, and what Mr. You know, what Johnson's saying is it really rings really loudly. You know, to my experience. You know, I remember when we were all isolated or we had to go home, March 13th of 2020. You know, I think we were all shocked. You know, we were home for a couple of weeks, but I remember at the same time, you know, some of us thought, you know, this is just going to be an extended spring break. So instead of spring break being 2 weeks, we're going to have 3 weeks like Christmas. I remember that was the talk. We were actually excited. It wasn't bad. I was happy. I was like, this is fun. What a release, you know. And then it went on and on and on. So the end of May, when they kind of opened America back up, I had to get out, me personally. I just couldn't be indoors. I had to send me to, man, I want to go to a restaurant. I want to go to a bar. I want to do something. And I did. You know what? I got COVID. You know, I got COVID, you know, and it was really weird because I didn't think I even knew I had it. It was one friend of mine who was a cop who said, look, man, you know, our sons were both training in sports together. And he said, we really like you, you know, Flye guy, you know, but do me a favor, go get tested, you know, and do your family a favor, go get tested.
Right.
And I got tested, and it was positive. It was so shocking because I was on my way to the dentist that day, and the doctor said, no, don't go. You need to stay home and isolate right now. I didn't think I was that bad. But you know what? I didn't know what was coming. You know, within 8 days, I had lost my sense of taste, smell, energy, fever. I couldn't even digest water. You know, water tastes gross. I was sucking on ice cubes, you know, for that. Drinking water made me throw up. I was trying to drink orange juice and take zinc, you know, and I threw up 4 times in one day. You know, I lost 35 pounds, you know, in the middle of the process. You know, luckily we were not at a school campus. So when the talk came back to go back to school campus, or, you know, I remember, you know, in spring, you know, I was feeling better. I was a little concerned, you know, but at that time, I remember when it came down to the vaccination, I said, you know what? I don't know, but something's got to be better than just getting out there and giving it a shot because you don't want COVID.
Right.
You know, is it working? No, it seems to be working, except for the fact you have a new variant, you know, and now you have people getting sick, even who've been, you know, vaccinated. So I say, you know, I don't know if it's because, you know, people like myself have have both been vaccinated, and we have the anti, you know, whatever it is, you know, in our body, you know. But if you don't have that, I say you need something. You don't want this.
Right.
You know, and the thing is this, you know, I think I'm fine because, you know, I guess I found out through the process I don't have any underlying issues. Right. But what about if you do? And what about if you didn't know and you find out that you do? You know, that's going to be a problem, you know, and I think that we need something, you know, I think we want to carry on life again, but we got to find a way to get through this. And yes, we need a vaccine. We need something that really, really works. Are they trying to kill us? Are they trying to trick us? I don't think they're trying to trick us. I think they're trying to make people better because this has really affected the entire world. And if we're saying that on a school campus, let's do something to save these kids. I say this, let's save kids unless you want to have a situation like New York where suddenly we're loading hospitals and caskets with children because they died of COVID because they refused to believe that somebody in the system was trying to actually help them.
Well,
And just to add to what Marcus just said, I was skeptical of Big Pharma too, because these are people just out there to make money, right? And it's a huge business, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But when you look at statistics now, the largest number of people that are being impacted and testing positive are kids. There has to be unvaccinated kids, exactly. I mean, look at the case with Florida, right? I mean, their numbers of kids who have tested positive and died have more than doubled, right? So that's startling, And so we got to do whatever we.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but they were talking about in the news just the other day that kids under 12 in the hospital, ERs, and we had Director Rebecca Mendoza, which is Brandon's mom. I'm sure she knows there's kids underage there, suffering, man, with this variant. I mean, with COVID's really bad. It's affecting our kids. So this is what I kind of worry about, and maybe they can get a better solution on how the kids line up at campuses. Maybe this is just a thought. Maybe have them overnight enter their information online. Some people don't have the computers at home. I get that. Use your friends if you can. Go to the library, whatever. But do it where they can enter it probably the night before, and they don't have to have kids head-to-head lined up to each other, because I've seen it happen many times in different schools, elementaries, middle school, high, you know what I mean? They're lined up back-to-back, head-to-head groups of kids. The other day, I see kids on recess. They're running around playing like nothing. I get it. A lot of people have been locked up for a year. Kids have been locked up for a year going through this. And they need some kind of recreational, atmosphere to get out and socialize. I get that. But us as parents, we have to realize and be a little more responsible that, take consideration that this is a virus. It's very bad. It's a pandemic. We have to keep eyes on it and try to teach our kids the right way. Hey, try to be safe, just keep your distance, whatnot. But there's got to be some kind of structural thing for you guys at school campuses that you should. I know it's just starting out. Kids are just barely coming back into school, but they got to figure out a solution that you guys, a better solution, so that the kids don't spread it as much as fast than it's going right now. I mean, they're head to head. You know what I'm saying? Kids are sitting next to each other, playing next to each other, and stuff like that. I know you can't probably do anything about it. I mean, it's just going to happen. But we got to find a solution. Do you agree?
Totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem is, with the schools opening, is that the states have tied money to schools opening and students going back in person, right? So that puts the schools in a quandary, right? Well, we got to open full in person, but at the same time give students the option if they want to continue to stay online and do independent study or whatever. But we had very small number of kids who wanted to do independent study, or stay online. I mean, we're a school of like 1,800 kids. And and we had something like 100 kids who decided to stay online.
Right.
So that's a small number. So, and then for the Department of Public Health to take away all these restrictions of social distancing, things like that. I mean, we had 6 feet, right, distancing when we went back in the spring. And all of a sudden we come back in the fall in full force, and there's no social distancing, measures in place. So all these are definitely putting a lot of people at risk, especially the kids, because it's the majority of the kids that are not vaccinated.
So do you want to, on that note, do you want to talk about why you're wearing a mask? Is it because a student was exposed?
Yeah, so a student was exposed there was a student in my class who was exposed to somebody who tested positive, right? So she sent me an email saying, look, I'm not going to be in class for the next few days, for 7 days, because I have to quarantine because I was exposed to somebody. So I responded back and asked her, I go, were you exposed to somebody before you came into my class? You know, because I wanted to know, because they didn't take anybody else out of my class, right? Just her. And she's like, yeah, I was exposed to her in the morning, and she tested positive on Friday, and she just got her results over the weekend. And I'm like, so they let her into school? They're like, yep. You know? And so, yeah, there's a lot of protocols that are being violated right and left. You know, I mean, you talk to anybody, they'll tell you it's a shit show.
I have the same situation at my workplace. It's the same thing, you know, and how they handle it. Their protocol is basically, if I'm getting relief on my duty, if I'm within 10 minutes with you, with you 10 minutes, then you're considered compromised. Yeah. You're compromised.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, this kid was in my classroom for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm wearing my mask to protect my family because I don't know.
Right.
I have to wait a few days before I can go get tested, you know, right. So I got to keep my family safe.
Right.
So, you know, I'm isolating in this room over here. And, you know, my kids and my wife are in another room. So, you know, I'm fortunate I have a separate bathroom that I can just use myself. So, you know, I have those kind of privileges. So where I can do that, you know, with our students, they can't isolate. They're living in crowded conditions. They're living, you know, in a room with like multiple kids, all that stuff. It's hard.
You guys kind of touched on one of the questions that I had, which was the social distancing. I can only imagine it's damn near impossible to do, especially with 1,800 kids. I worked as a corrections officer before. It's impossible there. And I know for a fact it's impossible because they're overcrowded already. And then I work as a New York State peace officer now, and it's equally impossible. But then the other question that I had was for the kids that do get quarantined, and I don't know, you said it's 7 days now. I know before it was 2 weeks. What do they do in regards to schooling? Do they have to attend an online class, or do they just get sent home with a packet?
Right now, what the district wants us to do is they want us to turn our cameras on in class so they can film us simultaneously while we're teaching the class. The other students who are being quarantined can also join in.
Okay.
Something like that has to be negotiated with the teachers' union.
Yeah.
The district right now is currently in the process of negotiating with the union on that specific issue. But before an agreement was reached, they went ahead and released it saying, this is what we're doing. So that's a negotiation in bad faith, but that's another story.
Okay.
Right? But that's what they want us to do.
And I'm very concerned about that, because to me, the way that really stretches itself out is like this. Number one, yes, I think there needs to be something that needs to happen. I don't know if the kids need to go back home or what we need to do, you know, but I do know that in the classroom, like, I know that John's just wearing his mask now. Now, if I take this and I put this on, right, and you look at me and you listen to what I'm saying, you can hear me pretty clearly for the most part. But if I turn this way and I begin to tell you something, I'm beginning to tackle the class, then there's some stuff that you might miss, all because I'm not facing you. This is what happens in the classroom, even for the teachers. There's been times that I'm teaching and I'll go, okay, I really want you guys to hear me now. So look, I lift up just for a second. And I'm doing that so they can understand, because the last thing I want is to say that I'm teaching a lesson, right? And all of a sudden the kids, you know, they don't understand. You know, or I got to repeat it again. So I don't know if anybody else is having that issue. You know, but it's something that I'm thinking about, because I'm concerned about what they're learning. I think there needs to be something else needs to be done. I think that right now they're trying to make teachers out, you know, you're responsible for it all. But I think, you know, you need to take it off the teachers a little bit. Right? Take out the teachers a little bit, figure out what else you all can do to help in this process. Because just because you have a teacher who's, you know, maybe educated, I know you're credentialed, you can teach the class, I know. But you know what? You need to figure out something else, because these, you know, teachers can't sit back, you know, and be masked all day long, you know, and trying to teach a lesson to kids who might understand, might not understand. You know, it's important though. We got to mask up because they're there. They're there, but we need to figure out something different. I don't know if just going back home and doing it, you know, the way we're doing it on Zoom. I mean, I like Zoom. I think we all got used to Zoom, you know, but we're missing that connection. So I think there needs to be some type of hybrid scenario that really works out. But at the end of the day, until we get this figured out with this virus, we might need a vaccination.
Kind of add to that as well. It's not just about that, but also just going back to Brandon's point when he was making earlier about social distancing, right, with 1,800 students. Yeah, we can't do it when all of them are on campus at the same time, right? But we have to learn to think outside the box, right? We're in the midst of a pandemic. Kids really need to come to school every single day.
Yeah.
Right.
They do.
Like Marcus was saying, some kind of hybrid model, right? We can have half the kids on one day. We can alternate days, right? So we can socially distance, right? It can be much more safer. There's lots of different ways. I mean, a lot of strategies that can be tried. But the problem is, because there's funding tied to everything, right? It ties the hands of the people at the district and at the school level and, at administration level and so on. So it prevents them from doing the things that they can do to make things even more safe for everybody involved.
I agree to that. I mean, I have 2 children of my own. They're in high school. And the problem I have is not that I don't trust my kids. It's that, I see how they are now. And I already assumed that prior to them opening up the schools, I saw that already happening, that there's going to be kids, especially high school kids, they don't want to wear their mask. They're going to take their mask off. They don't care, So I felt that the best thing as a parent was to keep them home and have them home study. And that's what I've just did. The question is, and we don't know until later down the road, like Brandon mentioned, we don't know what the action's going to happen later on because, yeah, I feel like I'm holding them, and people were saying you're holding them back from social, event, being social, getting that social atmosphere. But here's the thing. I think personally, I would rather have my kids safe, my children safe, and deal with it later. Deal with the social issues with them later. Brandon, Brandon, you're the only child. Yeah. So you did mention to me before you had that you weren't that very sociable in high school, right? You didn't break out of your shell.
Interactions came when I stepped into the real world. In regards for me, all my interactions from high school, I played football, did wrestling. I was social, but none of it carried over. It didn't really matter. All of it mattered when I had to adapt in the real world. And I feel like, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong on any of these points, but I feel like school is less about the education and the development now, and it's more about something else. Like,
I don't think you showed up to class, my man.
I did. But that's the thing is also at one point or another, you also sit there and it's like, this class doesn't matter. I know this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. There's a lot of things that are taught even in college. And when I started paying for college is when I sat there and I'm like, why the hell do I need a speech class? I know how to speak to people. I know how to communicate with people. Teach me about the thing that I actually want to learn about.
Yeah. I'm laughing with you, not at you, my man.
No.
Yeah. No, I mean, Brandon brings up a good point, and, I did a lot of workshops last year because everything was on Zoom. And I was able to do that because I had the time because it was, right at the comfort from my home. And so a lot of the workshops that I went to, a lot of them were saying, look, this is our opportunity to re-envision education and what it should look like, right? Look at it from a completely different way. Don't go back to the old, what we had where we were losing kids. Let's grab the kids while we can. They're going to come back. They're going to be excited. They're going to be, full of energy and vigor. Let's capture them while we can, and let's talk about what do they want to learn. So I teach mainly U.S. history. And so my first week of school was, hey, here's a Post-it. Write down what you want to learn about U.S. history this year. And if they are writing something down, I put it on my board. And I'm like, all right, these are the topics we're going to be covering this year. I went through every single kid's Post-it. A lot of them were similarities and so on. This is what we're going to be covering. And that, now you got the students' interest.
Right.
Because this is what they want to learn.
And
I mean,
believe that.
I can apply it to any standard, California standard, whatever framework you name it, right?
Yep.
Because it's dealing with U.S. history. It's what I'm teaching, you know. And so it worked out great, you know. And the other thing about Brandon's point is, you know, we had a lot of kids last year when we were online, right? We found out that they actually thrive in this online environment. You know, they don't do very well in person because they're worried about all this socialization and, you know, fitting in, and they're misfits or whatever, and they're outliers. They just didn't fit in, or they were left out or isolated. But when we went online, these kids thrived in that environment. So there should be lots.
My kids went that route too. They did excellent at home, and so when I saw that, I mean, they were doing good in school in the first place, but I saw that they were more focused. They were at their comfort at home, and they were doing extremely well. I even have teachers calling me now. You know, they send us emails saying, "Hey, your kid is beyond the expectation already. He's doing good. You know, keep it up. You know." So I have no problem homesteading my kids. They don't have no problem with it. They enjoy it. They do miss their friends. I get that, you know what I mean? But like I said, again, I would rather have my kids safe and deal with the social part later.
Yeah, well, my kid was the opposite. She didn't do well in school, in online. She was the complete opposite. Other than that, we sent her to a dual immersion school, which is called Adelante in San Jose, which taught them how to speak Spanish, read it, write it, and speak it. And it was a great program, and she went all the way to the 4th grade. The 5th grade started this year, but everything else was in class except for last year, and she had a hard time. But from the beginning, from 1st to 5th, she was outstanding. Honor roll, this, that. When we went to online classes, that kid, she couldn't grasp it. She couldn't. I couldn't figure it out. She wasn't getting, well, they didn't do much of honor roll and this and that year. Everybody was learning, but we noticed that she was lacking in a lot of areas. And then when this thing started getting into full effect, that school size was 1,300 kids. And we made the decision, and which we're fortunate enough to say, hey, let's put her in a private school. We got her into a St. John Vianney's in San Jose, and she went from like 1,300 students to 310 students. So that was one of the things that we did to help alleviate the large amount of students and being exposed to it by going to a private school. And now she's doing great. Although it's still early, but she loves it. She loves the interacting. She loves the touching. She loves the talking. She loves the atmosphere. Before, she didn't like that. She didn't like the online. She just was so bored. You know, we'd go in there and she'd be doing other things. She wouldn't focus on what needed to be focused on. So those, you know, the opposite effect of your guys. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think we just might be introverts. That might be what it is.
yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
guys. Listen, Johnson, I guess we lost Marcus here, but you know, I definitely want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And elaborating and spreading that news, especially answering our questions. Hopefully it helped people at home. Again, you know, much props to you for the educational people that are out there teaching our kids. You know, the things. I really appreciate it. Marcus, again, thank you. I know you got cut off. I'll shoot up to you later. Thank you so much for joining us. Brandon, Brown, I appreciate it. You guys at home, appreciate it. Subscribe, like. If you have any comments you'd like to, please drop them in the comment bar. And we'll get back to you guys as soon as we can with those comments. Again, much love. Appreciate it. And see you in the next one.
Thank y'all for having me today.
No problem. Thank you.